Chapter 44. It was almost 4 in the morning and I hadn't slept, my mind still burning with the images of Rosa Castro's tortured body, thinking of what had been done to her before her life ended under a rock in the sea. I thought about her parents and the McDanielses, and that these good people were suffering a kind of hell that Hieronymus Bosch couldn't have imagined, not in his most inspired day or night. I wanted to call Amanda, but didn't. I was afraid I might slip and tell her what I was thinking. Thank goodness we don't have kids. I swung my legs over the bed, turned on the lights. I got a can of Pog out of the fridge, a passion fruit, orange, and guava drink, and then I booted up my laptop. My mailbox had been filled with spam since I checked it last, and CNN had sent me a news alert on Rosa Castro. I scanned the story quickly, finding that Kim was mentioned in the last paragraph. I quickly typed Kim's name into the search box to see if CNN had dragged any new tidbits into their net. They had not. I opened a can of Pringles, ate just one, made coffee with the complimentary drip coffee maker, then pecked away at the internet some more. I found Doug Cahill videos on YouTube, frat house clips and locker room antics, and a video of Kim sitting in the stands at a football game, clapping and stomping. The camera went back and forth between her and shots of Cahill playing against the New York Giants, nearly decapitating Eli Manning. I tried to imagine Cahill killing Kim, and I couldn't rule out that a guy who could slam into 300-pounders was a guy who could get physical with a resistant girl and accidentally or on purpose break her neck. But in my heart, I believe that Cahill's tears were real, that he loved Kim, and logically, if he had killed her, he had the means to get lost anywhere in the world by now. So I sent my browser out to search for the name the female tipster had whispered in my ear, the suspected arms trader. Nils middle name Ostertag Bjorn. The search returned the same leads I gotten the day before, but this time I opened the articles that were written in Swedish. Using an online dictionary, I translated the Swedish words for munitions and body armor, and then I found another photo of Bjorn dated 3 years earlier. It was a candid shot of the man with the regular, almost forgettable features getting out of a Ferrari in Geneva. He was wearing a handsome chalk-striped my phone is screwing up. Suit under a well-cut topcoat, carrying a Gucci briefcase. Bjorn looked different in this photo from the way he looked at the industrialist's black tie dinner, because Bjorn's hair was now blonde, white blonde. I clicked on the last of the articles about Nils Ostertag Bjorn, and another photo filled my screen, this one of a man in a military uniform. He looked about 20 or so, had wide-spaced eyes and a boxy chin, but he looked nothing like the other photos of Nils Bjorn I had seen. I read the text beneath the photo and made out the Swedish words for Persian Gulf and enemy fire, and then it hit me. I was reading an obituary. Nils Ostertag Bjorn had been dead for 15 years. I went to the shower, let the hot water beat down on my head as I tried to fit the pieces together. Was this simply a case of two men with the same unusual name? Or had someone using a dead man's identity checked into the Wailea princess? If so, had he abducted and possibly murdered Kim McDaniels? Chapter 45. Henri Benoit woke up between soft white layers of bedding in an elegant four-poster bed in his room at the Island Breezes Hotel on Lanai. Julia was snoring gently under his arm, her face warm against his chest. Late morning sunlight filtered through the filmy curtains, the whole wide Pacific only 50 yards away. This girl, this setting, this inimitable light, it was the cinematographer's dream. He brushed Julia's hair away from her eyes with his fingers. The sweet girl was under the spell of the kava kava, plus the generous lacing of Valium he'd put in her cup. She'd slept deeply, but now it was time to wake her for her close-up. Henri shook Julia's arm gently, said, "Wakey, wakey, monkey face." Julia cracked open her eyes and said, "Charlie, what? Is it time for my flight?" "Not yet. Want another 10 minutes?" She nodded, then dropped off against his shoulder. Henri eased out of bed and got busy turning on lamps, replacing the media card in his video camera with a new one, setting the camera on the dresser, blocking out the scene. Satisfied, he removed the silk tassel tiebacks from the curtains, letting the heavy drapery fall closed. Julia mumbled a complaint as he turned her onto her stomach. He said, "It's okay, it's just Charlie," as he tied her legs to the posts at the foot of the bed, making a clove hitch knot with the cords, and then he tied her arms to the headboard, using an exotic Japanese chain knot that photographed beautifully. Julia threw a sigh as she slipped into another dream. Henri went to his duffel bag, sorted through the contents, put on the clear plastic mask and blue latex gloves, unsheathed the hunting knife. Masked and gloved, but otherwise naked, Henri placed the knife on the nightstand, then knelt behind Julia and stroked her back before lifting her hips and entering her from behind. She moaned in her sleep, never waking, as he pumped into her, his pleasure overtaking reason, and told her that he loved her. Afterward, he collapsed beside her, his arm across the small of her back until his breathing slowed. Then he straddled the sleeping girl, twirled her short hair around the fingers of his left hand, and lifted her head a few inches off the pillow. "Ow," Julia said, opening her eyes. "You hurt me, Charlie." "I'm sorry, I'll be more careful." He waited a moment before drawing the blade lightly across the back of Julia's neck, leaving a thin red line. Julia only flinched, but with Henri's second cut, her eyelids flew open wide. She twisted her head, her eyes growing huge as she took in the mask, the knife, the blood. She sucked in her breath, shouted, "Charlie, what are you doing?" Henri's mood shattered. He'd been filled with love for this girl, and now she was defying him, wrecking his shot, ruining everything. "For your sakes, Julia, show a little class." Julia screamed, bucked violently against the restraints, her body having more range of motion than Henri expected. Her elbow collided with his hand, and as the knife danced away from him, Julia filled her lungs and let loose a long, undulating horror movie screech. She'd left Henri no choice. It wasn't graceful, but it was ultimately the best means to the end. He closed his hands around Julia's throat and shook her. Julia gagged and thrashed against the rope as he squeezed off her air, controlled every last second of her life. He released and squeezed her neck again and again, and then finally she was still, because she was dead. Henri was panting as he got off the bed and crossed the floor to the camera. He leaned toward the lens, put his hands on his knees, said with a grin, "Better than I planned. Julia went off script and ended our time together with a real flourish. I just love her. Is everybody happy?" Chapter 46. Henri was stepping out of the shower when he heard a knock at the door. Had someone heard Julia screaming? A voice called out, "Housekeeping." "Go away," he shouted. "Do not disturb. Read the sign, huh?" Henri tightened the sash of his robe, walked to the glass doors at the far end of the room, opened them, and stepped out onto the balcony. The beauty of the ground spread out before him like the Garden of Eden. Birds chirped their little hearts out in the trees. Pineapples grew in the flower beds. Children ran along the walks to the pool as hotel staff set up lounge chairs. Beyond the pool, the ocean was bright blue. The sun beat down on another perfect Hawaiian day. There were no sirens, no men in black, no trouble on the horizon for him. All was well. Henri palmed his cell phone, called for the helicopter, then went to the bed and pulled the comforter over Julia's body. He wiped down the room, every knob and surface, and turned on the TV as he dressed in his Charlie Rollins gear. Rosa Castro's face grinned at him from the TV screen. A sweet little girl. And then there was the continuing story of Kim McDaniels. No news, but the search went on. Where was Kim? Where could she be? Henri packed his gear, checked the room for anything he might have overlooked, and when he was satisfied, he put on Charlie's wraparound sunglasses and ball cap, swung his large duffel onto his shoulder, and left the room. He passed the housekeeper's cart on his way to the elevator and to the stout brown woman vacuuming. "I'm in 412. "I can clean now?" she asked. No. A few more hours, please." He apologized for the inconvenience, said, "I've left something for you in the room." "Thank you," she said. Henri winked at her, took the stairs down to the marvelous velvet jewel box of the lobby, with birds flying through one side and out the other. He settled his bill at the desk, then asked a groundskeeper for a lift out to the helipad. He was already thinking ahead as the hotel's oversized golf cart ran smoothly alongside the green, the wind picking up now, blowing clouds out to the sea. He tipped the driver and, holding down his cap, ran toward the chopper. After buckling in, he raised his hand to say hello to the pilot. He pulled on headphones, and as the chopper lifted, he snapped off shots of the island with his Sony, what any tourist would do. But it was all for show. Henri was well beyond the magnificence of Lanai. When the helicopter touched down in Maui, he made an important call. "Mr. McDaniels, you don't know me. My name is Peter Fisher," he said. My phone just lost its place. Brushing his speech with a bit of Aussie. "I have something to tell you about Kim. I also have her watch, a Rolex." Chapter 47. The Kamehameha Hostel on Oahu had been built in the early 1900s, and it looked to Levon like it had been a boarding house, with small bungalows surrounding the main building. The beach was right across the highway. Out on the horizon, surfers crouched above their boards, skimming the waves, waiting for the big one. Levon and Barbara stepped over backpackers in the dark lobby, which smelled musty like mildew with a touch of marijuana. The man behind the desk looked like he'd washed up on the beach 100 years ago. He had bloodshot eyes, hair in a white braid even longer than Barb's, and a stained Bullish on America t-shirt with the name patch, Gus. Levon told Gus that he and Barb had a reservation for one night, and Gus told Levon that he'd need to be paid in full before he handed over the keys. Those were the rules. Levon gave the man $90 in cash. No refunds, check out at noon, no exceptions. "We're looking for a guest named Peter Fisher," Levon said. "He has an accent. Australian or South African, maybe. Peter Fisher, you have his room number?" The clerk flipped pages of the guest book, saying, "Not everyone signs in. If they come in a gang, I only need the one signature of whoever's paying. I don't see any Peter Fisher. Either way, I don't see him. Most people eat in our dining room at dinner. $6, 3 courses. Ask around later and you might find your man." Gus looked hard at Levon and said, "I know you. You're the parents of that model that got killed over on Maui." Levon felt his blood pressure rocket, wondered if today was the day he would be cut down by a fatal myocardial infarction. "Where'd you hear that?" he snapped. "What do you mean? It's on TV, in the newspapers." "She's not dead," Levon said. He took the keys. With Barb behind him, they climbed to the 3rd floor, opened the door to an appalling room. 2 small beds, mattress springs, poking at grimy sheets. The shower stall was black with mold, and there were years of crud in the blinds, and the scatter rug looked damp to the touch. The sign tacked over the sink read, "Please clean up after yourselves. There's no maid service here." Barbara looked helplessly at her husband. "We'll go downstairs for dinner in a while and talk to people. We don't have to stay here. We could go back after we find this Fisher person." "Of course," Levon said. But what he was thinking was, if Fisher hadn't checked out of this hellhole, if the whole thing wasn't a hoax like Lieutenant Jackson warned him from the day they met. Chapter 48. Henri didn't rely on the costume, the cowboy boots, or the cameras, or the wraparound shades. The trappings were important, but the art of disguise was in the gestures and the voice. And then there was the X factor, the element that truly distinguished Henri Benoit as a first-class chameleon, was his talent for becoming the man he was pretending to be. At 6:30 that evening, Henri strolled into the rustic dining room of the Kamehameha Hostel. He was wearing jeans, a summer white blue cashmere sweater, sleeves pushed up, Italian loafers, no socks, gold watch, wedding band. His hair, street gray, was combed straight back, and his rimless glasses framed the look of a man of sophistication and means. He gazed around the rough-hewn room at the rows of tables and folding chairs, and at the steam table. He joined the line and took the slot that was offered before heading toward the corner where Barbara and Levon sat behind their untouched food. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "We're about to leave," Levon said. But if you're brave enough to eat that, you're welcome to sit down. What the heck do you think this is? Henri asked, pulling out a chair next to Levon. Animal, vegetable, or mineral? Levon laughed. I was told it's beef stew, but don't take my word for it. Henri put out his hand, said Andrew Hogan from San Francisco. Levon shook his hand, introduced Barb and himself, said we're the only ones here in the over 40 crowd. Did you know what this pit was like when you booked your room? Actually, I'm not staying here. I'm looking for my daughter. Lori just graduated from Berkeley, he said modestly. I told my wife that Laura's having the time of her life, camping out with a bunch of other kids, but she hasn't called home in a few days, a week actually. So Mom is having fits because of that poor model who went missing, on Maui. Henri turned his stew over with his fork, looked up when Barbara said, that's our daughter, Kim, the model who is missing. Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say. How are you holding up? It's been awful, said Barb, shaking her head, eyes down. You pray, you try to sleep, try to keep your wits together. Levon said, you're willing to chase any scrap of hope. What we're doing here, we got a call from some guy named Peter Fisher. He said he was with Kim the night she went missing, that she left her watch behind, and if we met him here, he'd give us the watch and tell us about Kim. He knew that Kim wore a Rolex. You said your name is Andrew? Henri nodded his head. Cops told us the call was probably bull, that there are nut jobs who love to screw with people's heads. Anyway, we've talked to everyone here. No one's heard of Peter Fisher. He's not registered at the fabulous Kamehameha Hilton. You shouldn't stay here either, said the man in blue. Listen, I rented a place about 10 minutes from here. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and it's clean. Why don't you two stay with me tonight? Keep me company. Barbara said, nice of you to offer, Mr. Hogan, but we don't want to impose. It's Andrew, and you'd be doing me a favor. You like Thai food? I found a place not far from here. What do you say? Get out of this hole, and we'll go looking for our girls in the morning. Thanks, Andrew, said Barbara. That's a nice offer. If you let us take you out to dinner, we'll talk about it. Chapter 49. Barbara woke up in the dark, feeling sheer, naked terror. Her arms were tied behind her back and they ached. Her legs were roped together at her knees and ankles. She was crammed into a fetal position against the corner of a shallow compartment that was moving. Was she blind, or was it just too dark to see? Dear God, what was happening? She screamed, Levon! Behind her back, something stirred. Barb, baby, are you okay? Oh, honey, thank God you're here. Are you all right? I'm tied up. Shit, what is this? I think we're in the trunk of a car. Christ, a trunk. It's Hogan. Hogan did this. Muffled music came through the back seat to where the couple lay trussed like hens in a crate. Barbara said, I'm going crazy. I don't understand any of this. What does he want? Levon kicked at the trunk lid. Hey, let us out. Hey! His kick didn't budge the lid, didn't make a dent, but now Barbara's eyes were growing accustomed to the dark. Levon, look. See that? The trunk release? The two turned painfully by inches, scraping cheeks and elbows against the carpeting. Barb working off her shoes, pulling at the release lever with her toes. The lever moved, but there was no resistance, no release of the lock. Oh, God, please, Barbara wailed, her asthma kicking in, her voice trailing into a wheeze, then a burst of coughs. The cables are cut, said Levon. The back seat. We can kick through the back seat. And then what? We're tied up, Barb gasped. So they tried, the two of them kicking without full use of their legs, getting nowhere. "It's latched, goddammit," said Levon. Barb was fighting to take one breath and then another, trying to stop herself from going into a full-blown gag attack. Why had Hogan taken them? Why? What was he going to do with them? What was to be gained from kidnapping them? Levon said, "I read somewhere you kick out the taillights and you can stick a hand out, wave until someone notices. Even if we just bust the lights, maybe a cop will pull the car over. Do it, Barb. Try." Barb kicked and plastic shattered. "Now you," she shouted. As Levon broke through the taillight on his side of the trunk, Barbara turned so that her face was near the shards and wires. She actually could see blacktop streaming below the tires. If the car stopped, she'd scream. They weren't helpless, not anymore. They were still alive, and damn it, they would fight. "What's that sound? A cell phone?" Levon asked. "In the trunk with us?" Barb saw the glowing faceplate of a phone by her feet. "We're getting out of here, honey. Hogan made a big mistake." She struggled to position her hands as the first ring became the second, thumbing the buttons blindly behind her back, hitting the send key, turning on the phone. Levon yelled, "Hello? Hello? Who's there?" "Mr. McDaniels, it's me, Marco, from the Wailea Princess." "Marco, thank God, you've got to find us. We've been kidnapped." "I'm sorry, I know you're uncomfortable back there. I'll explain everything momentarily." The phone went dead. The car slowed to a stop. Chapter 50. Henri felt blood charging through his veins. He was tense in the best possible way, adrenalized, mentally rehearsed, ready for the next scene to play itself out. He checked the area again, glancing up to the road, then taking in the 180 degrees of shoreline. Satisfied that the area was deserted, he hauled his duffel bag out of the back seat, tossed it under a tangle of brush before returning to the car. Walking around the all-wheel drive sedan, he stooped beside each tire, reducing the air pressure from 80 to 20 pounds, slapping the trunk when he passed it, then opening the front door on the passenger side. He reached into the glove box, tossed the rental agreement to the floor, and removed his 10-inch buck knife. It felt like it was part of his hand. He grabbed the keys and opened the trunk. Pale moonlight shone on Barbara and Levon. "Henri, as Andrew said, is everyone all right back here in coach?" Barbara launched a full-throated, wordless scream until Henri leaned in and held the knife up to her throat. Barb, stop yelling. No one can hear you but me and Levon, so call off the histrionics, okay? I don't like it." Barb's scream became a wheeze and a cry. "What the hell are you doing, Hogan?" Levon demanded, wrenching his body so he could see his captor's face. "I'm a reasonable man. Explain yourself." Henri put 2 fingers under his nose to resemble a mustache. He lowered his voice and thickened it, said, "Sure, I will, Mr. McDaniels. You're my #1 priority." "My dear Christ, you're Marco? You're him? I don't believe it. How could you scare us like this? What do you want?" "I want you to behave, Levon. You too, Barb. Act up and I'll have to take strong measures. Be good and I'll move you up to first class. Deal?" Henri sawed through the nylon ropes around Barbara's legs and helped her out of the car and into the back seat. Then he went back for Levon, cutting the restraints, walking the man to the back of the car, strapping them both in with the seat belts. Then Henri got into the driver's seat. He locked the doors, turned on the dome light, reached up to the camera behind the rear view mirror, and switched it on. "If you like, you can call me Henri," he said to the McDanielses, who were staring at him with unblinking eyes. He reached into the pocket of his windbreaker, pulled out a dainty bracelet-style wristwatch, and held it up in front of them. "See, as I promised. Kim's watch, the Rolex. Recognize it?" He stuffed it into Lavon's jacket pocket. "Now," Henri said, "I'd like to tell you what's going on and why I have to kill you, unless you have questions so far." Chapter 51. When I woke up that morning and snapped on the local news, Julia Winkler was all over it. There, filling the TV screen, was her achingly beautiful face and a headline in bold italics running under her picture, "Supermodel Found Murdered." How could Julia Winkler be dead? I bolted upright in bed, goosed up the sound, stared at the next shot, this one of Kim and Julia posing together for the Sporting Life photo story, their lovely faces pressed together, laughing, both absolutely radiant with life. The TV anchors were going back over the breaking news for those who've just tuned in. I stared at the tube, gathering in the stunning details. Julia Winkler's body had been found in a room at the Island Breezes Hotel, a 5-star resort on Lanai. A housekeeper had run through the hotel, shouting that a woman had been strangled, that there were bruises around her neck, blood all over the linens. Next up, a waitress was interviewed, Emma Laurent. She'd waited on tables in the clubroom last night and recognized Julia Winkler. She'd been having dinner with a good-looking man in his 30s, Laurent said. He was white, brown-haired, with a good build. He definitely works out. Winkler's date signed the check with the room number 412 registered to Charles Rollins. Rollins left a good tip, and Julia had given the waitress her autograph, personalized it, to Emma from Julia. Emma held up the signed napkin for the camera. I got a pog out of the fridge, guzzled it, watched the camera cutting out of live shots outside the Island Breezes Hotel. Cruisers were everywhere, the loud garble of police radios squawked in the background. The camera held on a reporter with the local NBC affiliate. The reporter, Kevin DeMartine, was well respected, had been embedded with the military unit in Iraq in 2004. He was now standing with his back to a sawhorse barrier, rain falling softly on his bearded face, palm fronds waving dramatically behind him. DeMartine said, "This is what we know. 19-year-old supermodel Julia Winkler, former roommate of the still-missing top model Kimberly McDaniels, was found dead this morning in a room registered to a Charles Rollins of Loxahatchee, Florida." DeMartine went on to say that Charles Rollins was not in his room, that he was sought for questioning, that any information about Rollins should be phoned in to the number at the bottom of the screen. I tried to absorb this horrendous story. Julia Winkler was dead. There was a suspect, but he was missing. Or, how the police like to describe it, he was in the wind. Chapter 52. The phone rang next to my ear, jarring the hell out of me. I grabbed the receiver. "Lavon?" "It's Dan Ehrenstein. Your paycheck. Hawkins, are you on this Winkler story?" "Yep, I'm on the case, Chief, if you hang up and let me work, okay?" I glanced back at the TV. The local anchors, Tracy Baker and Candy Koalani, were on screen. and a new face had been patched in from Washington. Baker asked the former FBI profiler, John Manzi, could the killings of Rosa Castro and Julia Winkler be connected? Is this the work of a serial killer? Those two potent and terrifying words, serial killer. Kim's story was now going global. The whole world was going to be focused on Hawaii and the mystery of two beautiful girls' deaths. Former Agent Manzi tucked at his earlobe, said serial killers generally had a signature, a preferred method for killing. Rosa Castro was strangled, but with ropes, he said. Her actual manner of death was drowning. Without speaking to the medical examiner, I can only go by the witness reports that Julia Winkler was manually strangled. That is, she was killed by someone choking her with his hands. It's too soon to say if these killings were done by the same person, Manzi continued. But what I can say about manual strangulation is that it's personal. The killer gets more of a thrill because, unlike a shooting, it takes a long time for the victim to die. Kim, Rosa, Julia. Was this a coincidence or a wildfire? I wanted desperately to talk to Levon and Barbara, to get to them before they saw Julia's story on the news. Prepare them somehow. But I didn't know where they were. Barbara had called me yesterday morning to say that she and Levon were going to Oahu to check out what was probably a bum lead, and I hadn't heard from them since. I turned down the TV volume, called Barb's cell phone number, and when she didn't answer, I hung up and called Levon. He didn't answer either. After leaving a message, I called their driver, and when I got forwarded to Marco's voicemail, I left my number and told him that my call was urgent. I showered and dressed quickly, collecting my thoughts, feeling an elusive and important something I should pay attention to, but I couldn't nail it down. It was like a horsefly you can't swat, or the faint smell of gas and you don't know where it's coming from. What was it? I tried Levon again, and when I got his voicemail, I called Eddie Kiola. He had to know how to reach Barbara and Levon. That was his job. Chapter 53. Kiola barked his name into the phone. Eddie, it's Ben Hawkins. Have you seen the news? Worse than that, I've seen the real thing. Kiola told me he'd been to the Island Breezes since the news of Julia Winkler's death had gone over the police band. He'd been there when the body was taken out, and he had spoken with the cops on the scene. He said Kim's roommate was murdered. Do you believe it? I told him I'd had no luck reaching the McDanielses or their driver, and asked if he knew where Barb and Levon were staying. Some dive on the eastern shore of Oahu. Barbara told me she didn't know the name. Maybe I'm paranoid, I told Kiola, but I'm worried. It isn't like them to be incommunicado. I'll meet you at their hotel in an hour, Kiola said. I arrived at the Wailea Princess just before 8 a.m. I was heading to the front desk when I heard Eddie Kiola calling my name. He came across the marble floor at a trot. His bleached hair was damp and wind-combed, and fatigue dragged at his face. The hotel's day manager was a young guy wearing a smart $100 tie and a blue gabardine jacket with a name tag reading Joseph Casey. When he got off the phone, Kiola and I told Casey our problem, that we couldn't locate two of the hotel guests, and we couldn't locate their hotel comp driver either. I said that we were concerned for the McDaniels' safety. The manager shook his head and said, we don't have any drivers on staff, and we never hired anyone to drive Mr. and Mrs. McDaniels. Not somebody named Marco Benevenuto, not anyone. We don't do that and never have. I was stunned into an open-mouthed silence. Keola asked, why would this driver tell the McDanielses he'd been hired and paid for by your hotel? I don't know the man, said the manager. I have no idea. You'll have to ask him. Keola flashed his ID, saying he was employed by the McDanielses, and asked to be let into their room. After clearing Keola with the head of security, Casey agreed. I took a phone booth to a plush chair in the lobby. There were 5 limousine services on Maui, and I'd worked my way through all of them by the time Eddie Keola sat down heavily in the chair beside me. No one's ever heard of Marco Benevenuto, I told him. I can't find a listing for him in all of Hawaii. The McDaniels' room is empty too, Keola said, like they were never here. What the hell is this? I asked him. Barbara and Levon left town, and you didn't know where they were going. It sounded like an accusation. I didn't mean it that way, but my panic had risen to the high water mark, and it was still climbing. Hawaii had a low crime rate, and now in the space of a week, 2 girls were dead. Kim was still missing, and her parents and driver were missing too. I told Barbara it should be me following that lead on Oahu, Keola said. Those backpacker joints are remote and kinda rough, but Levon talked me out of it. He said that he wanted me to spend my time here looking for Kim. Keola was snapping his wristband, chewing his lip. The 2 of us ex-cops without portfolio were trying desperately to make sense out of thin air. Chapter 54. It was becoming a 3-ring circus in the lobby at the Wailea Princess. A line of German tourists had lined up at the desk. A flock of little kids were begging the gardener to let them feed the koi. Even a presentation on tourist attractions was going on 30 feet away. Slides and film and native music. Eddie, Keola, and I might as well have been invisible. No one even looked at us. I started ticking off the facts, linking Rosa to Kim, Kim to Julia, and to the driver, Marco Benevenuto, who had lied to me and the McDanielses, who were missing. What do you think, Eddie? Do you see the connection? Or am I fanning the flames of my overheated imagination? Keola sighed loudly and said, tell you the truth, Ben, I'm in over my head. Don't look at me like that. I do cheating husbands, insurance claims. What do you think? Maui is Los Angeles. I said, work on your friend, Lieutenant Jackson, why don't you? I will. I'll get him to reach out to the PD in Oahu, get a serious search going for Barbara and Levon. If he won't do it, I'll go over his head. My dad's a judge. That must come in handy. Damn right it does. Keola said he'd called me, then left me sitting with my phone in my lap. I stared across the open lobby to the dark aqua sea. I could see the outline of Lanai. Through the morning mist, the small island where Julia Winkler's life had been snuffed out. It was 5 a.m. in LA, but I had to talk to Amanda. What's up, Buttercup? She slurred into the phone. Bad stuff, honeybee. I told her about this latest shocker, how it felt like spiders were using my spine as a speedway, and no, I hadn't had anything stronger to drink than guava juice in 3 days. Kim would have shown up by now if she could do it, I told Amanda. I don't know the who, where, why, when, or how, but honest to God, honey, I think I know the what. Serial killer in paradise, the story you've been waiting for. Maybe a book. I hardly heard her. The elusive fact that had been bothering me since I had turned on the TV 2 hours before lit up in my mind like it was made of bright red neon. Charles Rollins, the name of the man last seen with Julia Winkler. I knew that name. I told Amanda to hold on a sec, got my wallet out of my back pocket, and with a shaking hand, I sorted through the business cards I'd stashed behind the small plastic window. Mandy, I'm here. Are you? A photographer named Charles Rollins came up to me at the Rosa Castro crime scene. He was from a Talk Weekly magazine, Loxahatchee, Florida. The cops think he may have been the last person to see Julia Winkler alive. He's nowhere to be found. You talked to him? You could identify him? Maybe. I need a favor. Boot up my laptop, please. I waited, my cell phone pressed so hard against my ear that I could hear the toilet flush in L.A. Finally, my beloved's voice came back on the line. She cleared her throat, said, Benji, there are 40 pages of Charles Rollins's on Google. Gotta be 2,000 guys by that name, 100 in Florida. But there's no listing for a magazine called Talk Weekly. Not in Loxahatchee, not anywhere. For the hell of it, let's send him an email. I read her Rollins's email address, dictated a message. Seconds later, Amanda said, it bounced back, Benji, mailer D-Daemon. I don't know how they pronounce that. Unknown email address. What now? I'll call you later. I've got to go to the police. Chapter 55. Henri sat 2 rows back from the cockpit in a spanking new charter jet that was almost empty. He watched through the window as the sleek little aircraft lifted smoothly off the runway and took to the wide blue and white sky above Honolulu. He sipped champagne, said yes to caviar and toast points from the hostess, and when the pilot made his all-clear announcement, Henri opened his laptop on the table in front of him. The miniature video camera he'd affixed to the rearview mirror of the car had been sacrificed, but before it was destroyed by the flooding seawater, it had sent the video wirelessly to his computer. Henri was dying to see the dailies. He put in his earplugs and opened the MPV file. He almost said wow out loud. The pictures unfurling on his computer screen were that beautiful. The interior of the car glowed from the dome light. Barbara and Levon were softly lit, and the sound quality was excellent. Because Henri had been in the front seat, he was not in the shot, and he liked that. No mask, no distortion, just his disembodied voice, sometimes as Marco, sometimes as Andrew, at all times reasoning with the victims. I told Kim how beautiful she was, Barbara, as I made love to her. I gave her something to drink so she wouldn't feel pain. Your daughter was a lovely person, very sweet. You don't have to think she did anything to deserve being killed. I don't believe you killed her, Levon said. You're a freak, a pathological liar. I gave you her watch, Levon. Okay, then look at this. Henri had opened his cell phone and showed them the photo of his hand holding Kim's head by the roots of her wild blonde hair. Try to understand, he said, talking over Barbara and Levon's insufferable wailing and snuffling. This is business. The people I work for pay a lot of money to see people die. Barbara was gagging and sobbing, telling him to stop, but Levon was in a different kind of hell, clearly trying to balance his grief and horror with the desire to keep the two of them alive. He'd said, let's go. Let us go, Henri. We don't know who you really are. We can't hurt you. Henri had said, it's not that I want to kill you, Levon. It's about the money. Yes, I make money by killing you. I can get you money, Levon said. I'll beat their offer. I will. And now, there on his laptop, Barbara was pleading for her boys. Henri stopped her, saying it was time for him to go. He'd stepped on the gas, the soft tires rolling easily over the sand, the car plowing into the surf. When it had good momentum, Henri had gotten out of the car, walked alongside it, until the water rose up to the windshield. Inside, the camera on the rear view had recorded the McDaniels' begging, the water sloshing over the window frames, rising up the seats where the McDaniels' arms were locked behind them, their bodies lashed in place with the seatbelts. Still, he'd given them hope. "I'm leaving the light on so you can record your goodbyes," he heard himself saying on the small screen. "And someone on the road could see you. You could be rescued. Don't count it out, but if I were you, I'd pray for that." He had wished them luck, then waded back up to the beach. He stood under the trees and watched the car sink completely in only about 3 minutes. Faster than he would have guessed. Merciful. So maybe there was a God after all. When the dome light winked out, he'd changed his clothes, then walked up the highway until he caught a ride. Now he closed his laptop, finished his champagne, as the hostess handed him the lunch menu. He decided on the duck l'orange, put on his Bose speakers, and listened to some Brahms, soothing, beautiful, perfect. The last few days had been exceptional, a fantastic drama, every minute a highlight of his life. He was quite sure everybody would be happy.